From as far back as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the idea of flying. While most kids my age were busy playing with toy cars or dreaming about becoming famous athletes, I was picturing myself gliding through the clouds, free from the pull of the earth. Growing up in a family that didn't have much money, I knew early on that I'd have to work hard to make my dream of becoming a pilot a reality. That dream became the driving force behind every choice I made. As I got older, I picked up whatever jobs I could find to save for flight school. Whether it was late-night shifts at the diner or spending hours mowing lawns, I was determined to make it happen. All the effort paid off when I finally earned my pilot's license. Not long after, I landed a position flying for the Air National Guard. But when my time with the Guard came to an end, a hiring freeze at the major airlines left me working for a smaller regional carrier. Through all the highs and lows, my wife Carly to me was my rock. She grew up with even less than I did, but from the time we met in 3rd grade, we were inseparable. I still remember telling her in junior high that I'd be a pilot one day. She smiled and said, "Take me with you." I promised her I would, and as soon as we could, we got married. Carly was tall, nearly 6 feet, with a slender frame, a sprinkling of freckles, slightly oversized ears, and a prominent nose. To me, she was stunning, the most beautiful bride I could imagine. Throughout my career, she followed me wherever I went, turning every place we lived into a warm, welcoming home. Carly had a knack for saving money and bargaining for anything we needed, though she couldn't resist collecting postcards from everywhere we traveled. With our savings and my modest $25,000 salary as a regional pilot, we bought a fixer-upper and poured our hearts into it. I didn't mind the modest living. I had Carly and the chance to fly every day, and that was enough. Carly found a job working for a real estate developer, and together we made things work. Life wasn't extravagant, but it was good. Despite the slow pace of airline hiring, we focused on enjoying the life we'd built and each other's company. Each morning, Marco, our head mechanic, would pick me up for work. He was a good friend and had helped me rebuild almost every part of my old truck. Marco and his wife, Isabella, had fled Cuba when they were just 18, and he often spoke proudly of his big family, especially his kids. One morning, Marco's youngest son, Victor, a high school freshman, joined us for the ride. As I climbed into the truck, I greeted them, buckled in, and mentioned needing to swing by Carly's office to return her cell phone, which she'd left at home. Victor, like most teenagers, had his headphones on, but when he spotted the phone in my hand, his curiosity got the better of him. He asked to take a look, and I tossed it to him. A moment later, Victor glanced up and grinned. "Looks like someone's getting lucky today," he said, holding the screen out to show me a message. The text read, "Protein lunch day 2. Confused, I asked him what it meant, and Victor scrolled through more messages, revealing a string of exchanges between Carly and a man named Darren, her boss. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. Carly was having an affair. I felt the color drain from my face and asked Marco to take me home immediately. Victor forwarded the messages to my phone, confirming they were from Darren Fields, Carly's boss at King One Developers. It was such a cruel cliché, my wife and her boss. Marco, noticing my shock, offered to drive me to a doctor, but I declined. I just needed to get home. Victor, seemingly unaware of the pain his reading caused, continued reciting more messages, each one a fresh blow. When we finally pulled into my driveway, I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. Sitting on the cool tile floor, I leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. This was the same bathroom Carly and I had remodeled together, and the memories only deepened the ache in my chest. Maybe it's not what it looks like, I tried to convince myself, clinging to a sliver of hope. Darren Fields was in his 50s, nearly 2 decades older than us. He was the epitome of the flashy real estate developer. Tall, lean, perpetually tanned, with dyed hair and plugs to cover his thinning scalp. He had a booming voice and a knack for telling jokes, both clever and crass. Still, I couldn't ignore the nagging doubts. Hoping to find answers, I decided to visit Carly's office under the pretense of taking her out to lunch. By 11:30 a.m., I was pulling into the parking lot at King One Developers. Inside, I told the receptionist I was there to return Carly's phone. After a few calls, she informed me Carly wasn't available. That's odd, I said. I've got her phone right here. The receptionist hesitated before mentioning she'd seen Carly leave with Mr. Fields, adding they often had lunch together, either at his house or the country club. My stomach churned, but I forced a polite smile. Thanks, I replied, feigning calm. I'll catch up with her later. I drove straight to Darren's house. I'd only been there once before, for a Christmas party, but it was impossible to forget. The place was ostentatious, with an Olympic-sized pool and a bright red Hummer H2 parked in the driveway. Seeing the Hummer confirmed they were inside. The front door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, my heart pounding. Upstairs, I heard muffled noises coming from the bedroom. With trembling hands, I dialed Carly's phone. The sound of her ringtone drifted out from behind the bedroom door, sealing my worst fears. I took a step back, trying to steady myself for whatever might happen next. Darren Fields, a voice answered when I called. Hey Darren, I said, speaking through Carly's phone. She left her phone at home, and the office said she's with you. Can you tell me where you are so I can drop it off? I paused, then added, Actually, why don't you just let me talk to her directly? Nathan, we're on our way back to the office from the club, Darren replied smoothly. We just wrapped up a lunch meeting with the CEO and stopped by my house to grab some paperwork. Carly's in the restroom. I stood just outside the bedroom door, listening as he lied without hesitation. Cracking the door open slightly, I saw Darren raise his voice toward the bathroom. Carly, your husband's on the line, he called out. Carly was sitting casually on the bed, wrapped in nothing but a towel. The way they interacted left no doubt in my mind. This wasn't a new situation. Hey Nathan, Carly said as she took the phone from Darren, her tone light and flirty. She carried on as if nothing was wrong. Thanks for finding my phone. I've been searching everywhere for it. Unable to stay in the shadows any longer, I pushed the door open and stepped into the room. They both froze. Well, Carly, I said, pointing directly at her. I don't think you're going to find your phone between Darren's legs. Darren bolted into the bathroom, slamming the door behind him, while Carly remained on the bed, unbothered. Get dressed, I said firmly. We need to talk. No, she replied with unnerving calm. I'm not going anywhere with you. I like living this way. I stared at her in disbelief. You enjoy being a cheating liar? I'm sorry you found out like this, Nathan, she said without a hint of remorse. But I want more from life than what you can give me. Darren can provide that now, not in a few years, but right now. This is what you're throwing our marriage away for? I gestured around the room, incredulous. I'm not throwing anything away, she said coolly. I've followed you for 15 years, living like a pauper, but I deserve better now. I'm done clipping coupons and bargain hunting. I want more, and Darren can give it to me. I just need you to respect my decision. Respect what, Carly? Your lies? Your betrayal? Darren hiding in the bathroom like a coward. She simply shrugged. The air in the room felt suffocating. I tossed her phone back onto the bed and walked out, flipping her off as I left. You two deserve each other, I said over my shoulder. I've got flights tomorrow. Get out of my house by the end of the month. The following weeks were a blur. They say grief comes in 7 stages, but I felt stuck in a loop of shock and denial. Each morning, I'd wake up expecting to see Carly, only for the painful memories to crash over me all over again. By the 3rd week, the emotional pain hit harder than any physical injury I'd ever experienced. Carly had shattered my heart, leaving me drowning in grief. Marco and Isabella were my lifeline during that time. They were the only ones I confided in, and they were just as shocked as I was. To them, leaving a spouse was unthinkable. Marco had once taken a bullet while escaping Cuba, and Isabella had kept him alive on a raft until they were rescued. Together, they'd built a life in America while raising 6 children. Their unwavering love and loyalty were both a comfort and a reminder of what I had lost. At the end of the month, anger replaced the grief when the bank called to inform me I was overdrawn. Carly had emptied every account we had. I couldn't secure a new line of credit, and the bank wouldn't help me because Darren Fields was one of their major clients. As if that weren't enough, a man served me divorce papers while I stood by my truck. Desperate for clarity, I combed through the paperwork. Carly was claiming that the repairs on my old truck equaled the value of her new Camry, and she'd cashed out every asset we owned. She offered me the house at an inflated appraisal, leaving me just 10 days to avoid foreclosure. Marco's son, a law student, reviewed the documents with his professor. The consensus was clear: I was at a serious disadvantage. Carly had powerful lawyers on her side, thanks to her new relationship, and I would lose if I fought them. With no other option, I sold my truck for $7,000 to stave off foreclosure and cover basic expenses for the next year. When I wasn't flying, I worked with Isabella's cleaning crews and biked everywhere to save money. My lifestyle became incredibly frugal, and I relied heavily on the home-cooked meals Marco and Isabella insisted I eat. Isabella even tried setting me up with women she knew, but I couldn't afford a soda, let alone a date. By the start of the second year, the divorce was behind me, and I was beginning to regain some stability. I even took some time off to work on the house. One day, while cleaning out a closet, I found boxes of Carly's old postcards. My first thought was to burn them immediately. Instead, I biked to the library and emailed Carly, asking what she wanted me to do with them. Her reply came within an hour. The postcards are where I've been, not where I'm going. Do whatever you want with them. I printed both emails for my records and went home. That night, I built a fire in the yard and roasted marshmallows while those postcards turned to ash. For the first time in years, I slept soundly and woke up without thinking of Carly. Over 2 years had passed since I'd last seen her. One Friday night, while taxiing onto the runway, a flight attendant informed me of an unruly passenger refusing to turn off his phone. I volunteered to handle it, expecting the usual, a firm word followed by reluctant compliance. But when I approached the passenger, I was stunned to find Darren Fields, drunk and yelling into his phone. What truly shocked me, though, was his companion, Carly. She was almost unrecognizable, adorned with gaudy jewelry, her hair bleached blonde, her features altered by plastic surgery, nose job, plumped lips, and more. I realized exactly where all the money had gone. Good thing Carly didn't waste it, I muttered to myself, shifting into professional mode as I approached Darren. Mr. Fields, I said firmly, you need to turn off your phone for the safety of this flight. Darren snapped at me, his tone dripping with arrogance. Off, fly boy. I'm closing a deal worth more than you and this airline combined. I turned to Carly, hoping she'd intervene, but she just stared blankly out the window, pretending I wasn't there. Sighing, I made my way back to the cockpit. Grabbing the intercom, I announced calmly, "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be returning to the terminal briefly. Thank you for your patience." My first officer had already started taxiing us back to the gate, where airport security stood ready. Darren Fields' day unraveled quickly when 3 airport police officers boarded the plane, followed by a stern-looking Homeland Security agent. Moments later, Darren was escorted off in handcuffs, charged with interfering with the flight crew and endangering the aircraft, serious federal offenses. Since we were already on the runway, the DHS agent informed me that Darren would spend the weekend in a holding cell, as federal courts don't operate on weekends. On top of that, he'd be placed on the no-fly list for 90 days and slapped with a hefty bill for fuel, landing fees, and ground crew expenses. Well, I thought, couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Back at Marco and Isabella's, I found myself sitting at their kitchen table, celebrating their daughter's acceptance into medical school. Marco's pride was palpable as he raised his glass. "She's going to be a rocket surgeon," he announced, his grin wide. I chuckled and politely declined another drink. Watching their joy was bittersweet, a stark contrast to what I'd lost with Carly. Isabella, ever blunt, cut through the mood. "Not like that worthless Carly. Captain," she added with a mischievous grin, "let me find you a nice Latina, someone who'll treat you right." I smirked. Isabella, with her thick accent and determined matchmaking, never missed an opportunity. I'm a little hesitant after last time, I joked, raising my glass. Isabella mumbled something to Marco in Spanish, her tone unimpressed. Captain, Marco said with a shrug. You're better off without her. No argument here, I replied. Isabella wasn't done. Scooting closer, she leaned in conspiratorially. Carly didn't know what she had. Her life isn't so happy now. Couldn't help but be curious. Come on, Isabella. What do you know? With her network of cleaners and housekeepers, Isabella had access to gossip that rivaled any intelligence agency. Lowering her voice, she began to spill. My girls say Carly's miserable. The other wives call her a lemon pie, sweet on the outside, but trouble underneath. They're scared she'll steal their husbands, so no one brings their wives to her parties. Only a few husbands show up, and they treat her like a piece of meat, which makes her and Mr. Fields furious. No more parties. I tried not to laugh, but Isabella wasn't finished. Fields won't marry her, you know. He doesn't trust her. Checks her phone, even hired a private detective to follow her. She was furious when she found out. Pouring myself another drink, I shrugged. What did you expect? There's no trust between thieves. They deserve each other. Isabella nodded, adding, I send older ladies to clean for Fields. He's always trying to touch the younger ones, but Carly blames the girls, says they're rude. It's not true, but no one wants to work there. He doesn't even tip. If Carly can't keep him happy, why blame the staff? I said dryly. Isabella laughed, and Marco jumped in to lighten the mood. Captain, we're going golfing tomorrow. Meet me at 9 Rivers for a raffle. You play golf? I asked, surprised. Marco nodded proudly. When we came to America, Isabella noticed successful people play golf. She bought me clubs on sale and made me take lessons. Even the kids learned. But she never lets me rent a golf cart. Isabella shot him a stern look. We're saving for college. God gave you legs. Use them. Marco raised his hands in mock surrender, his smile never fading. Watching them, I couldn't help but admire their bond. The next day, Marco brought along his son's clubs for me to use since I'd sold mine after the divorce. It was my first real day off in months, and I was finally having some fun, until we walked into the clubhouse. A large photo of Darren Fields and Carly hung prominently on the wall, commemorating their role in some event. Seeing it soured my mood instantly. Marco noticed too. Captain, he said with a sly grin, keep an eye on the entrance. Let me know if anyone's coming. Puzzled, I stood guard as he rummaged in his bag. After a few minutes, he whispered, all clear, let's go. Turning back, I saw he'd drawn a handlebar mustache, devil horns, and crooked teeth on Darren's face. Carly wasn't spared either. She now sported a massive nose and oversized ears. What are you, 12? I laughed, but I couldn't deny that my spirits were lifted. Let's go play golf, Marco said, grinning mischievously. The day was going great until we reached the 7th hole. Ahead of us, an older man took a swing, then suddenly collapsed, clutching his chest. Marco and I dropped our bags and sprinted toward him. His wife, panicking, fumbled with her phone but couldn't get a signal. Run to the clubhouse, I yelled. She hesitated before finally taking off. Marco, start compressions, I shouted as I began chest compressions. For 10 grueling minutes we worked tirelessly, but we were struggling. Just as I was about to give mouth-to-mouth, a golf cart screeched to a halt nearby. A young woman jumped out, a hard case in hand. Stand back, she said firmly, pulling out a portable defibrillator. She attached the sensors and followed the device's instructions, delivering a shock. The man's chest jolted, and his eyes fluttered open. He's breathing, she said, but we need to get him to a hospital fast. At that moment, Marco arrived in a Ford F-250, my old truck. Recognize your ride, Captain? He joked as we loaded the man into the truck. The woman, whose name tag read Parker, jumped in the front. I slid into the driver's seat. Hold on, I said, veering off the path. Parker, on the phone with the hospital, rattled off medical jargon. Not bad for a drink cart girl, I quipped. She shot back, "I'm a nurse, dumbass." All I could manage was a sheepish, "Oh," as we screeched into the emergency entrance. Doctors were already waiting. For a week, Marco and I basked in a bit of local fame as airport heroes. That glow dimmed when I received a letter from the 9 Rivers Country Club, billing me $2,000 for course damages. They even threatened legal action if I didn't pay. I just laughed and tossed it in the trash. Good luck squeezing water from a stone, I thought. I never found out if the man fully recovered, but I heard he was airlifted out shortly after being stabilized. When I tried to contact Parker to thank her, I discovered she no longer worked at the club. After a week of hitting dead ends, I turned to Isabella. It took her all of 15 minutes to deliver a full dossier on Parker, complete with details I didn't even know I needed. Isabella's network of cleaners and housekeepers could rival any intelligence agency. "Parker," she began, as though reading a report, "is 26. She's the only daughter of her father, who was an immigrant laborer she cared for until he passed. Her mom died when she was a child. She's single, recently got her nursing degree but hasn't taken the licensing exam yet. Works the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift at Mercy Nursing Home, rents a room, and loves vanilla ice cream with sprinkles." Isabella smirked. "That's it. No birthmarks, no warrants." "She's a good girl," Isabella added with a sly grin. "Goes to Mass every Sunday at St. Paul's. Want me to set you two up?" "Thanks, Isabella," I said quickly, standing up before she could grab her phone. "I'll handle it from here." Her laughter followed me out the door. The next day, Parker was sitting on her front steps when I showed up with a bouquet of flowers. She smiled knowingly. "Why'd you wait so long, Nathan?" she teased. How did you know I was coming?" I stammered. She laughed as she stood and took the flowers. "The Latino Women's Network works both ways, Nathan. Stay put while I put these in water." Parker was easy to talk to. As the evening went on, she shared more about her life, balancing school, a tough nursing job, and delivering drinks at 9 Rivers to make ends meet. "I had a lot of debt," she explained. "The nursing home pays for rent and basics, but the club job helped me knock out my loans and save for the nursing exam." "What happened to the club job?" I asked. Her expression darkened. "That little monster truck ride got me fired. The board said I left early, but I know it was Darren Fields. He's been after me since day one. Now he entertains his secretary during his Wednesday lunch breaks." She shuddered. I wasn't surprised. Parker had heard plenty about my messy marriage from the same gossip network. Some of it was accurate. Much wasn't. "You know," she said, grinning, "there's a rumor you're gay. Some people think that's why your wife left." I laughed. "Where did that come from?" "Well," she said, looking a little embarrassed, "some of the cleaning crew thought you didn't respond to their efforts. The skirts got shorter, the blouses lower, and when you didn't react, they figured you weren't interested in women." Shaking my head, I laughed harder. "You must mean Anita in Orlando. Believe me, I noticed, but I have a rule." "A rule?" Parker asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yep. Never mix work with pleasure," I replied with a grin. "Too bad your ex-wife didn't have that rule," she quipped. "Let's just say Carly can eat crap," I muttered. "I wanted to see more of you anyway." Parker chuckled. "Nathan, I'm not much to look at. I'm no AED," she joked. "Can we meet tomorrow?" I asked. She hesitated. "I've got house repairs. Trouble with the door hinge. Maybe I made the mortise holes too shallow." "How did you adjust the reveal?" I asked, curious. "The what?" Parker looked confused, then rolled her eyes. "Oh, Nathan, just give me your address. I'll fix it myself." Parker had grown up learning from her father, a laborer and handyman, and her skills rivaled any pro. If she didn't know something, she'd bring in a retired craftsman from the nursing home to teach us. We spent the next day together, and as time passed, we grew closer. Finally, one evening I worked up the courage. "Parker," I said, "will you move in with me?" She raised an eyebrow. "Nathan, I'm not the type of girl who moves in after one good night. I want you in my life and my bed every night," I admitted. But it's practical too. Living together would save money and help you reach your goals faster. Parker crossed her arms. I'm not trading myself for a place to stay. You wouldn't be, I said. In fact, with all the work you've done on the house, I should be paying you. After a long pause, she finally smirked. Think Marco will lend us his truck on Friday? 6 months later, the house was in the best shape it had ever been, and I was happier than I'd been in years. Parker was focused on passing her nursing exam, and I didn't push her about marriage, knowing she wanted to build her career first. Meanwhile, the housing market crash hit hard, and Darren Fields' company, King One Developers, was among the hardest hit. Overleveraged and riddled with financial mismanagement, the business collapsed. Regulators uncovered massive fraud. Darren, facing insurmountable debt and a ruined reputation, made a tragic decision. One night, he drove into his garage and never came out. I felt sorry for the mess he left behind for others, but not for him. Oddly, I didn't even think of Carly. She was a part of my past. My future was with Parker. A few weeks later, as I walked home from the bus stop, I noticed a figure sitting on my porch steps. Even in the dim light, I recognized her. "Hi, Carly," I said, standing over her. "Hi, Nathan," she said, lifting her eyes to meet mine but not budging from the steps. I stood still for a moment, taking in the sight of her before responding. "Carly, I'd love to say it's good to see you, but I'm exhausted, and I just want to get inside." She didn't move. "Why are you walking, Nathan? Where's your truck?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're sitting on it." Carly glanced around, confusion crossing her face. "Oh, you sold it for the house. I get it. But why, Nathan? You were so attached to that truck." I shrugged, the bitterness in my voice sharp. "I loved a lot of things back then, Carly. You learn to live without them eventually. That truck never let me down, but people do." Her face softened, and she asked quietly, "What about me, Nathan? Do you ever miss me?" I let out a dry laugh. "Of course I do, Carly. I miss you with every bit of bitterness I can muster." Carly sighed, her gaze dropping to the ground. Couldn't help but press on. "Besides, how could I miss you? You're still here." "Nathan, please," she said, her voice strained with desperation. "I just got out of the hospital 2 weeks ago. I need to talk to you." I crossed my arms, not letting any warmth show. "I'm sorry to hear that, and I genuinely hope you're getting better, but I don't know what you want from me anymore. You made it clear a long time ago that I wasn't enough for you. Nathan, Darren's dead. That night, I almost died too." Her voice broke slightly as she spoke the last part. I froze for a moment, hearing the weight of her words. "Yeah, I heard. His little stunt in the garage nearly took you with him." I shrugged. "Guess those Hummers really are bad for the environment. Should have convinced him to go electric." Her eyes flashed with irritation. "That's not funny, Nathan." I leaned against the doorframe, rubbing my face. "I'm not trying to be funny, Carly. I'm just tired. Maybe we should just go our separate ways." "Nathan, please," she begged again, her voice trembling. "Just let me come inside. I need to explain everything." Reluctantly, I stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. As Carly struggled to stand, I noticed how she had changed. Not just in her appearance, but in the way she carried herself. Her once confident posture was now slumped, her face altered by time, surgery, and hardship. The cane she leaned on felt like a symbol of all that had fallen apart. Quietly, I grabbed her gym bag and followed her inside, thinking, this is going to be a hell of a conversation. We sat at the dining room table, the harsh overhead light making the subtle but obvious changes in her face more pronounced. One side of her face was stiff, her eyelid drooping, and the corner of her mouth pulling downward. It made the rest of her features seem off-kilter, and she kept dabbing at her lips with a handkerchief. Carly took a deep breath. "It was a stroke, Nathan. Carbon monoxide poisoning did it. I was lucky. If the maid hadn't come by, I would have been dead. Now, one side of my body's weak and my memory's shot. It gets worse when I'm tired." She paused, waiting for my response, but I said nothing. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said after a moment, trying to keep my voice even. How are you doing now? Nathan, that's actually why I'm here. I need money. I almost spit out my coffee. The words caught in my throat as I struggled to hold it together. You've got to be kidding me. She avoided my gaze, staring at the table instead. I'm barely scraping by myself, and you know why. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Carly, didn't you have assets? What happened to all the things you had with Darren? Last time I saw you, you were covered in so much jewelry, you looked like a rapper. Carly wiped the corner of her mouth again, her eyes hollow. It's all gone, Nathan. Darren pawned everything, trying to keep the creditors at bay before the collapse. Whatever was left, the bankruptcy attorneys seized. After everything that happened, the cops turned the house into a crime scene. I just got back last week, and all I could grab was this gym bag of clothes. I stared at her, feeling something stir deep inside. What about disability or social services? I asked, trying to stay calm. I applied, she said, her voice distant. But most programs take forever to review, and they told me I don't qualify for full disability, so I won't get much help. And none of Darren's old friends are willing to help. Carly let out a bitter laugh. No one wants me around anymore. They're scared I'll try to hit on their husbands for money. Honestly, I can't blame them. After the divorce, I burned a lot of bridges. And most of our mutual friends. They sided with you. I rubbed my temples, frustrated. So what now, Carly? Sell the Camry. It's still worth something. She shook her head, eyes wide with disbelief. The Camry. Forget it, I said, cutting her off. What happened to the car? Carly's voice trembled. Darren bought it for me, but the title was in King One developer's name. The bank took it too. A surge of anger welled up inside me. You got that car just months after we moved here, and you started seeing Darren even before we'd signed the mortgage papers. Nathan, she turned away, her voice soft. Darren and I didn't get together until 6 months after I started working for him. I couldn't stop myself. Oh, how generous of you. An extra 2 months to wait before you jumped into bed with him. My mistake. Nathan, she said, her voice breaking. I know I messed up. I'm not denying it. This is just as hard for me. I never wanted us to end up like this. I looked at her, my frustration bubbling over. Carly, do you really want to dive into this? Yeah. Nathan, why not? She sat back, her expression challenging. I exhaled sharply, gesturing with a hand. The truth is supposed to set you free, right? Go ahead, try. Carly's face softened, and she leaned forward, her voice earnest. It's not about trying, Nathan. I just want you to know it wasn't your fault. It was all me. I got swept up in it. First, it felt great. When I started working at King One Developers, I was treated like royalty. Darren picked up every tab. Suddenly, I didn't have to worry about money. I didn't have to account for every dime. He gave me attention, and I was surrounded by important people. They made me feel like I mattered. You mattered to me, Carly. You were my wife, my partner. Wasn't that enough? I asked, the hurt in my voice almost impossible to mask. I see that now, she said quietly. I just wish I'd realized it back then. It all started when you left for that 3-day business trip. Darren invited me to this political fundraising dinner. $2, $500 a plate. My meal alone could have covered 2 months of our mortgage. Did you get chicken or fish? She added, trying to lighten the mood, but it fell flat. Nathan, stop, she said, frustration creeping into her tone. I'm being serious here. She exhaled deeply. Darren had been sweet for weeks, but that dinner, it was different. He bought me a $2,000 gown without batting an eye. Everyone thought I was his girlfriend. They treated me like I was special. We sat with a former vice president. It was all so glamorous, so powerful. For the first time, I felt like I was on top of the world. By the end of the night, we were in the parking lot, having fun in his Hummer. The valet must have gotten a nice tip, I said, the sarcasm dripping from my words. Nathan, please, it wasn't like that. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. What exactly do you call it, Carly? Classy? Playing around in a parking lot? Sounds more like something you'd see on a street corner. Did you open the moonroof to make it feel more romantic? She flushed, but pressed on, her voice softening. I felt guilty the next day. I was terrified you'd find out. When you came home, I clung to you, trying to make up for what happened with Darren. I scoffed, a bitter smile curling on my lips. And I thought you were just trying to show gratitude to all the plumbers we hired. Her face fell, but she kept going, her voice wavering with a mix of guilt and conviction. I swore to myself it wouldn't happen again. I promised I'd be the best wife. But Darren kept apologizing, saying it was a mistake, that we'd had too much to drink, that it wasn't worth losing me over one stupid night. He was so smooth, and I fell for it. A week later, I went with him and some other executives to the coast for a big project. He rented a private jet. Nathan. Private jet. Couldn't believe it. On the way back, Darren landed a huge deal, multi-million-dollar kind of deal. There was celebrating, champagne, and then, she paused, taking a shaky breath. We ended up in the plane's bathroom. I clenched my fists, fighting back the rage. So you just couldn't resist, huh? The whole glamour of it all really got to you. She looked at me, eyes pleading. I'm not proud of what I did. I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to explain how it happened. After that trip, I got swept up in the lifestyle, gambling, fine dining, the jewelry, the clothes. At first, it was just when you were away. But then it was lunches and quick rendezvous during the day. Eventually, I started resenting you, Nathan. Resenting us. I felt like our life wasn't enough. I realized too late that I was risking everything we had. And the worst part is, it wasn't even Darren's money. It was King One developers' money. Corporate funds. Darren didn't even have any real savings. His paycheck went straight to his ex-wives. His Hummer, leased. The house, the Rolex, all in the company's name. Darren didn't have anything of his own. Carly looked at me with hollow eyes, as if she were seeing me for the first time. That's the truth, Nathan. All of it. Do you have any questions? I leaned forward, my voice low and cutting. Just a couple. If you had everything you wanted, why didn't you leave me right away? Why drag it on for a year and a half, keeping me in the dark while you cheated on me? What was so thrilling about living this double life, balancing between Darren's wealth and your poor husband? She looked away, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. At first, it was because I didn't want to hurt you. We've been together since we were kids. You were my best friend. I told myself it was just a phase, that it would end soon, that you'd never find out, and everything would go back to normal. But the longer I stayed, the harder it got. All this new stuff, the luxury, the attention, it made me feel like someone else, like I was someone. For the first time, I wasn't just watching from the outside. I was part of it. I kept putting off ending things with Darren. I was like a fly stuck in honey. Her voice broke, and she wiped her eyes. When you found me in Darren's bedroom, I panicked. I knew I couldn't come back from that. I knew you'd never forgive me. But at that point, half a life with Darren seemed better than nothing. I let out a bitter laugh. How about choosing honesty, Carly? Maybe we could have worked through this if you'd come to me after the first time. Her face crumpled, her eyes desperate. Nathan, I swear I was planning to end it. I was going to quit my job and leave Darren that Friday, even if you hadn't caught us. I was ready to dedicate myself to you, to us. I'd already printed and signed my resignation letter. It was sitting in my desk drawer. I looked at her in disbelief, my voice thick with sarcasm. Nice try, Carly. Makes me regret walking in on you and Darren. 2 more days, and none of this would have happened. What a fool I am, I spat. Let me guess. You don't have that resignation letter with you, do you? No, Nathan. I can't prove it, she whispered. But it's the truth. After I moved in with Darren, I got bored. Everything revolved around him. I started doing things on my own. I enjoyed it. I gave her a piercing look, a dangerous edge creeping into my voice. All right, Carly, here's the big question. Was Darren better in bed than me? She hesitated, then met my gaze, her eyes searching for an escape. If I wanted someone to lie to me, I'd pay for it. So don't lie. Just tell me the truth. Carly sighed, her shoulders sagging. You were my first, Nathan. You were the only one before Darren. We were good together. But Darren, he was different. He was older, more experienced. He'd been with so many women. I didn't stand a chance. So, was it just a payment for services rendered? I asked, bitterness twisting in my chest. She flinched, but her voice was steady. I wasn't promiscuous, Nathan. I wasn't doing it for the thrill. I don't know what happened. I just got caught up. I pressed further, my voice cutting. What do you call someone who trades favors for money or services? Then, that's not what it was, she said, her eyes hardening, though I could see the guilt in them. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I muttered. She stiffened. Whatever, Nathan. But no, we didn't do it in our house or our bed. Darren wanted to, but for me it wasn't about him or the affair. It was about the life I thought I deserved. For the first time I felt like I was someone. I was living first class, and I thought that was the answer to everything. She glanced away, then looked back at me. I didn't want to be here, I continued. So, Darren didn't mind sharing you while you were cheating on me? Was he generous with others? After I moved in with Darren, he was possessive, Carly said, her voice quiet. He wanted me to cut you off completely. He couldn't stand that I was still talking to you. But I ignored him. We never had a relationship with both of you on the same day. Darren loved showing me off, but hated it when I spoke to other men. The irony is he had women all over. Girlfriends, escorts. When he traveled, he'd bring call girls, but when it came to other women, he liked it to be just us. Once, I gave in with his second wife. They were still friends, but I didn't like it. She was just a trophy wife, blonde, empty-headed, like a mannequin. I raised an eyebrow. So what was the difference between you two? Was it the touch? The feel? Carly recoiled, shaking her head. I thought she had it all, Nathan. The money, the beauty, everything I wanted. I used to laugh at people like that. And then I became one of them. Hollow. Plastic. I sneered. Did I pay for Barbie's makeup? Or did Darren cover her silicone? Carly stiffened. It wasn't your money, Nathan. Darren hid the surgery costs in some project budget. You'll probably want to talk to the auditors about that. I shook my head, disgusted. You've always been a good negotiator, Carly. Maybe you can use some of the tricks Darren taught you to settle things with them. She wiped her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan, I can't live like this anymore. I just want to disappear. I shook my head. Carly, if you're hoping for some kind of redemption or rescue like Darren got, I can't help you. I've got a garage, but no car. She flinched, but I couldn't stop. Sorry, I shouldn't be making jokes at your expense. I added, though I knew it sounded more like a jab than an apology. It felt wrong, but at the same time this burning anger bubbled up, demanding release. I thought she might have heard me, but was I even speaking to her anymore? They say love and hate are two sides of the same coin, I muttered, trying to sort through the mess in my chest. I can't tell if I'm disgusted by the person you've become or just furious at what you've done to me, to us, to everything we built. Carly, I said, my voice quieter now. I know a lot has happened, but before all this, we were always there for each other. You were my best friend. I really need you now. We've been together for most of our lives, and I don't know if it's too late, but can't we at least try to salvage something of what we had? I stood, fighting the tremor in my legs. Carly, I'd rather chew on tinfoil and shave my head with a cheese grater, I said, my words venomous. I drained my now cold coffee, wiping my mouth as if to rid myself of the taste of it. I don't even know who you are anymore. How can I trust you? How do I know you haven't stashed away some money or jewelry, just waiting for the right moment to leave again with everything you can carry? Carly slumped in her seat, the color draining from her face. I'll never leave you again, Nathan. Please, I need your help. I can't take that risk anymore, Carly. It's too much, I said, the weight of my words settling in like lead. Can't or won't? She asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. I shrugged. leaning against the counter. What's the difference? Before I could say anything else, the door swung open and Parker stepped inside. Her nursing uniform, a floral print that was more practical than stylish, clung to her frame, the tired lines of a long shift apparent on her face. "Oh, hey," she said, catching sight of the scene before her. She made her way over to Carly and extended her hand with cool politeness.
I'm Parker.
"And you are?" Carly, still in shock, managed to raise her hand and shake hers. "I'm Carly." Parker paused, her gaze shifting between Carly's cane, the limp in her arm, and the unnatural way she held her face. "Bell's palsy?" she asked, her voice all business. Carly's face tightened. "I beg your pardon?" she snapped. "Bell's palsy," Parker repeated, her finger pointing toward Carly's face with the certainty of someone accustomed to medical conditions. "It's a condition that affects the nerve-controlling facial muscles. Can happen after a stroke. It's common with herpes." "I don't have herpes." Carly shot back defensively, her cheeks turning red with anger. Then she took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging. "But yeah, I did have a stroke." Carly recounted the whole sorry mess. Her affair, the lies, everything she dragged me through. When she finished, Parker looked at me, a silent understanding passing between us. Then she stepped toward me and gestured toward the kitchen. "Nathan," Parker said, once we were alone, her voice low but firm. "We can't just throw Carly out. Not like this." "Okay," I replied flatly. "I'll call one of Marco's sons. They can drop her at the shelter." Parker's grip tightened on my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "Nathan, you can't be serious. You can't just leave her out there. They'd tear her apart." I pulled my hand away, shaking my head. "What do you want me to do? Invite her into our bed? The three of us?" Parker raised an eyebrow, her expression almost daring me to challenge her. "You heard me. It wouldn't be her first time with another woman. Or maybe that's your plan." I smirked, leaning back, but it didn't feel funny. "Way more of a nightmare than a fantasy." I shot back. "Losing you to Carly? I'd be better off sucking on a tailpipe." Parker rolled her eyes, dismissing my comment. "Fine. Carly can sleep on the couch tonight. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." "So, who is this?" I asked, a sarcastic edge creeping into my voice. "Now we're living in a version of keep your enemies closer?" Parker lowered her gaze for a moment before meeting my eyes with a soft sigh. "Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. It was low, kicking someone when they're already down. But then I remembered it's just one night. You better count the silverware when you wake up." I muttered. "We don't have any silverware worth stealing." Parker's face grew serious, and she looked at me with piercing eyes. "Doesn't it bother you, Nathan, that my ex-wife, the one with that reputation, is going to sleep under our roof?" I stared at her, considering. Then I shrugged. "Not if I trust you, and if you trust me. Besides, if you leave me for plastic surgery and trout lips, you were never mine to begin with." Parker's lips curved into a faint smile. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Besides, you're stuck with me now," she teased, pulling me in for a kiss. The next morning, I was up early, dressed in my maintenance jumpsuit, preparing for a day of cleaning houses for Marco Isabella's wife's company. The clock read 6 a.m. when Carly appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, wrapped in a blanket, looking worn out after a restless night on the couch. I barely glanced up, taking a long sip of coffee, letting the silence settle between us. "Nathan, do you still have our boxes of cards?" Carly asked, stifling a yawn. "They were yours, Carly," I muttered without looking at her. "No, I don't have your postcards anymore," she said, her voice laced with guilt. I exhaled sharply. "I burned them, Carly. Roasted marshmallows over them, actually, like watching our past go up in flames." She looked down, the words hanging heavy in the air between us. "I just wanted to thank you for letting me stay the night," she said after a long pause. "Don't thank me, Carly," I replied, not bothering to turn around. I wasn't thrilled about it. Carly looked over at Parker, hesitating before asking, "And Parker? You and her. I didn't answer. That part wasn't for Carly to know. Nathan, Carly began, rubbing her cracked lip nervously. I don't know if I said this last night, but
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for everything. For cheating. For leaving. For taking everything I could. For ruining us. I stared at her, cold and unmoved. Be specific, I said, my voice sharper than I intended.
I'm sorry.
I wanted more than you did, she said softly, her voice almost pleading. That sounds more like regret than an apology, I replied, standing up and throwing the rest of my coffee into the sink. Tell me, Carly, if everything was still in place, if you still had all the stuff from the last few years, would you even be here? Nathan, I'm sorry I left you, she whispered as I rinsed my cup. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned around, finding her standing close. I see someone's happy I stayed the night, she said, offering a weak, hopeful smile. Don't flatter yourself, Carly, I replied, shrugging her off. Her smile faltered, but she didn't stop. Nathan, I meant what I said last night. I'm yours, only yours. You can have me anytime, anywhere. She extended her hand, waiting for me to take it. I stared at her outstretched hand, but all I felt was a hollow ache. I've been down this road before, Carly. I'll pass. I turned and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of the decision, knowing the fight with Parker was inevitable. The reality hit me later. The one person I wanted out of my life, Carly, wasn't going away that easily. Parker and Isabella came at me with their usual relentless arguments. Marco, Isabella's husband, wisely stayed in the background, avoiding the firestorm. In some ways, I envied him. Their talk about charity, forgiveness, and turning the other cheek sounded noble on paper, but in practice, felt like a trap. Two Catholic Latina women, both convinced that God was on their side, are an unstoppable force. They argued that it was our duty to help those in need. Cast your bread upon the waters, they quoted, along with lines from scripture about forgiveness. They kept pushing the idea that just because I once loved Carly enough to marry her, that history meant I should help her now. Good grief, I'd rather take on a couple of rabid badgers than listen to this, I muttered under my breath. Parker dismissed Carly's latest antics, her attempts to seduce me, as a result of the shock of her life crashing down. Parker believed it was just Carly's way of clinging to a past she no longer had. I wanted to believe that too, but I couldn't. I'd seen Carly's true face, the face of someone who would do anything to get what she wanted. Eventually, Isabella found Carly a job cleaning houses. Hardly the glamorous life she once had, but it was a start. The best we could do was put her in the mother-in-law apartment above my garage, which Parker arranged. Carly paid a small rent, which eased things a bit. Parker and Carly would sit on the porch from time to time, talking. I avoided those conversations. Who wants to relive a disaster? Parker would joke about it, but it was no joke to me. Carly kept to herself for the most part, working, attending church, and rarely leaving the apartment. I didn't bother her much, but I'll admit, I sometimes muttered under my breath about where I wished she would go, though I kept it to myself. Carly didn't try anything else. After a few months, things began to settle down. I thought we might actually get some peace, but then life threw another curveball at us. One evening, I returned home to find Parker talking to an older woman with silver hair. She looked vaguely familiar. I extended my hand, but before I could say anything, the woman wrapped me in a tight hug. Nathan, you remember Mrs. Wren? Parker said, gesturing toward her. Then it clicked. She was the wife of the man we'd saved on the golf course, the one who'd had a heart attack. Now, I had a name and a face to match the memory. I'd let her go to get help while Marco and I tried to bring her husband back from the edge. Come on, Mrs. Wren exclaimed, pulling me into the house. Owen's been waiting for you all day, and he's crankier than a bear with a thorn in his paw. Who's waiting for me? I asked as we entered the dining room. Sitting at my table was the man we'd rescued. He had silver hair like his wife and an air of authority that immediately filled the room. A cane rested beside his chair. Damn boy! Get over here! The silver-haired man barked. I'm Boone Wren, And I've been waiting to meet you for a long time. He tapped the chair beside him with his cane. Sit your lucky ass down right here. Boone Wren wasn't the kind of man you could ignore. He exuded the sort of power that demanded respect. Slightly intimidated, I sat next to him. He slapped me on the back so hard I almost flew out of my chair. Damn boy! Mind if I call you Nathan? He said without waiting for an answer. I owe you my life. Boone Wren always pays his debts. He tossed a paper into my lap. Listen up, Nathan. This is a personal services contract. I've got a Learjet 60, and once you get certified to fly it, you're going to be my personal pilot. It's a 15-year contract with annual raises and bonuses. It auto-renews every year whether I live or die. You're set for life. Just don't crash the damn plane. If you do, you're dead anyway, so no worries about getting paid. Doc says I can't fly anymore, but I need to stay in the air. The Lear stays here. I'll pay you. Got it. I glanced down at the contract. The paycheck amount made my head spin. It was ridiculous, like winning the lottery. Mr. Wren, this is incredibly generous. But what? Boone interrupted, his voice gruff. You think my life ain't worth a few bucks? Hell, the insurance company should be paying you for saving my ass. You kept them from having to cough up my life insurance payout. I was speechless, but Boone wasn't done. He slid another stack of papers my way. Here's the deed to this house, fully paid for. Consider it a signing bonus. I don't want my pilots worrying about mortgages when they're flying me around. I need them focused. He paused for effect, then slid another piece of paper toward me. Here's the title for a new F-250 Power Stroke. You can pick it up at the dealer tomorrow. Don't make me see you waiting at some damn bus stop. Boone tapped his cane again. That $1.4 million from Nine Rivers? Forget it. My lawyers are handling it. You'll get an apology and a full membership by the end of the week. Turning to Parker, he added, we need to get you a nursing license. I've got tutors lined up, and you'll pass the test in 90 days. After that, you'll work at All Saints Hospital in pediatrics and cardiology. In a year, you'll be my flying nurse, and your student loans are fully paid. Parker, in shock, hugged Boone. He chuckled. Careful, you'll set off my pacemaker. I thanked Boone and mentioned Marco. Boone grinned. Marco's covered. He's getting certified on the Lear 65 with a raise. I also paid off his kids' tuition, housing, and loans. Before he left, Boone dropped a bombshell. Now, you two need to get married. I don't like my employees living in sin. Parker and I did get married, and it turned into a huge event at Nine Rivers, organized by Isabella and the Latina women, with Boone footing the bill, including a cruise as a wedding gift. Carly showed up too. She was doing better, though she still needed a cane and had some memory issues. She rented the apartment above our garage. I was polite but kept my distance. Carly had started seeing someone from her church, and I wished them well. My new job brought together my two loves, Parker and flying. Parker would send Carly postcards from the places we visited, and the two of them would sit on the porch, reminiscing about the old days. That peace wouldn't last, though. Parker had to stop flying temporarily because we were expecting a baby. Soon I'd have 3 loves.